Welcome back to the Books Brothers podcast, the podcast where longtime friends spread across the country reconnect over the pages of a good book. Each episode, we dive into what we are reading, sharing our thoughts, debate, and enjoy a few laughs along the way. Whether you are a big reader or just enjoy listening to the discussion, join us as we explore insightful topics and connect each week. I'm Garrett.
I'm Fliz.
I'm Matt.
I'm Thomas.
I'm Adam.
We are currently reading through Gates of Fire, an epic novel of the Battle of Thermopylae. This week we'll be discussing book 4, Arete, and I really loved this story. So I'm going to give basically the Cliff Notes version of what happened, and then I can't wait to get into the discussion. So the chapter starts out, or the book, there's just more battles that the Persians are attacking. More and more cities, and Xerxes is getting more and more cities to simply surrender out of phobos, which it's been fun to try to figure out like the Greek and how we get current terms. So fear, phobia. So Xiones, meanwhile, longs for his cousin Diamanches so much. He tries to find her. He can't and decides, you know what? I just need to get her off my mind. Let's just get married. He marries Rooster's cousin, and within 10 months, already has a baby, and ends up having 2 at the point by the time that this chapter takes place. This chapter, like the name implies, the focus is on Arete, Polynikes' wife, who, along with other women, play a pivotal role actually in galvanizing the Spartans to deploy and fight the Persians. So the background with her, she has given birth to 4 girls. So no boys and thus no male heir to continue Polynikes' name, which comes very much into view in this section. The Persians attacked a city called Trace, and 10,000 Greeks went to fight. But upon arrival to the city, they determined they were destined to lose, so they all literally went home. The city was ransacked, women were raped, babies were decapitated, young men castrated to become eunuchs. It was just horrible. And it's the Spartan women who were pissed off and just were berating the men for just not even trying. They were even lobbying to fight themselves. Eventually, the Council of Elders in Sparta do decide to fight. And this is where the Battle of Thermopylae is first introduced, where it's set like this is what's going to happen. So here's the timeline. The full Greek army was to be assembled and arrive in 2.5 weeks. That's how quickly they could get going. However, the Persians would be there in 10 days. Clearly, that isn't enough time. So to hold them, 300 all-sire Spartans were to be an advance party to make it to the gates first. All sires were soldiers who had sons to continue the family name, meaning this was literally a suicide mission. So Xiones would not be going because his master Polynikes had no male heir with Arete. But the story gets more interesting. Polynikes' wife Arete, her brother, a Spartan, had an affair with a non-Spartan who bore a bastard child, Rooster. So Rooster is Arete's nephew. We learned about Rooster in detail in last week's episode. It was the title of the literal book 3. So I'll only give a brief recap. You can listen to last week's episode if you want a full description. So Rooster has been offered to become a full Spartan citizen, and he has declined. His hatred towards Sparta for enslaving his mother's people as helots was too strong. He declines again when the 300 soldiers are being chosen. So typically, people who refuse this offer are literally assassinated. The Spartans fear that if you turn down becoming a Spartan citizen, you aren't truly loyal to the Spartans and can turn against them with the enemy in the course of battle. He avoided assassination the first time, but he won't avoid it this time. The Crypteia, which is a secret assassination group of Spartans, come and seize Rooster and his family, but Alexandros and Xiones were there trying to convince him to change his mind. So the Crypteia come and seize Rooster. Spartans and squires, Xiones, were there. So by law, they were committing treason. So they all get arrested and taken to this secret trial, which isn't going to be much of a trial. Rooster has about minutes before he's executed, before his baby son is going to be killed, because the thought is Even as a baby, when that son grows up, he'll resent the Spartans and seek revenge. So suddenly, out of nowhere, Arete appears and, in my opinion, pulls off one of the most badass truth bombs and negotiations. So typically, a woman is not allowed to be at one of these meetings at all. She defies commands to leave, even from her husband Polynikes, and declares that the baby boy is not Rooster's son, is her own husband's son. And it turns out he is. Polynikes slept with Rooster's wife, and the son is his, not Rooster. So Polynikes admits this, and immediately Arete negotiates a Spartan to sponsor the baby boy to become a Spartan and go through Agage training when he turns 6. She also negotiates the mom's release to raise the child in Arete's home. Everyone complies. So at this point, everyone except Rooster is safe from execution. And so to wrap this up, Alexandros then steps in. So we think, all right, Rooster's done for. Alexandros then negotiates Rooster's survival. Rooster is so renowned with his fighting in the battlefield that the Helots, the Messians, and Sparta, Alexandros is afraid that if the Crypteia assassinate him, the Helots will likely revolt and there will be an uprising and join the Persians. But the Spartans are in a conundrum because they can't keep him in their midst. So Alexandros proposes to release him to the Persians. The Persians will gladly receive an escaped slave, and because of Rooster's hatred towards Sparta, the Persians likely will allow him to fight against the Spartans, at which time the Spartans can kill him on the battlefield. The king before Leonidas already deposed of Persia and is the best informant to Xerxes, so Rooster can't provide any new intelligence that Demaratos, the deposed king, hasn't already shared, so he's not a risk. So by releasing him, the Helots will view him as stupid for not accepting the Spartan citizenship invitation, and they won't be upset with the Spartans since he's now seemingly fled Sparta. The Spartans agree. Rooster is spared again, and the chapter concludes with the Spartan elder overseeing the hearing informing Polynikes that he now is eligible to be chosen as one of the 300 now that he has admitted to having a bastard son himself who will be sponsored into Spartan citizenship. So, thank you for listening through that recap. What were your all's thoughts on this book?
There's a lot to talk about. So much that happened. So much cool stuff. But first thing to note, the way I understood it is, Garrett, you made it sound like Polynikes really did father the child.
Uh-huh.
But the way I saw it is it's questionable whether he did or not.
Oh, really?
And I don't think he actually did.
Oh, really?
Because when they're at the trial, there were several other men, soldiers, who are saying whenever they go on war campaigns, Polynikes was never, ever unfaithful. He is the most loyal, the most faithful soldier they've ever met. And I saw it as Arete trying to save the child's life. And the only way to do that in a real way is to convince her husband to lie and say that he fathered the child.
Okay.
So even though Polynikes says that he did it, I saw it as he was listening to his wife more than admitting to having sexual relations with that girl. Because if he said no, then it would make his wife, Arete, look like a complete fool for barging into this ceremony. It would make her look like a liar. And there was a moment where she is just like looking into his eyes, pleading, from how I understand it, pleading to Polynikes to understand what she's trying to get him to do. And so I thought it was more of Polynikes taking a fall, taking the blame for something he didn't do, just to, one, save the child, and two, back up his wife.
I mean, I think it's clear, too, that he would like to be chosen as a part of this 300 group, too, though. So that might be part of his motivation.
But why would so you're saying what's Rooster's wife's name? Harmonia. Wait, you're saying that she got it as well? Like she was like, I need to lie to give my son a chance to live. I mean, she probably understood that culturally, but so Harmonia had to lie. Arete had to lie, and Dynakes. So you're saying they're all lying?
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, I may have misinterpreted here.
I could be misinterpreting also, but that's how I understood it.
But man, I just feel like, okay. I mean, we were just talking about in the last episode how he's like a very honorable and is the like token example of a Spartan. So what do the Adams think? I feel like I'm being convinced that Matt's right, also because he's really smart. But I've read this twice and that did not cross my mind.
I think Matt's right because he's Asian, so he's smarter than all of us.
Oh my gosh.
No, I think it could go either way. I think that there was like a shadow of doubt that was cast when they talked about him being faithful during battles and such. You know, there's a lot of motivations that are going on. I think it could really go either way. I think both would make sense along the storyline. I think that the motivations for everything would make sense both ways. I mean, if you think about Arete, so it's her nephew, or no, this would be her great nephew. If that the little boy is, because it's the son of her nephew. And so there's definitely that familial tie with that. But at the same time, she even acknowledges that her even stating that is saving the life of this baby, but essentially destining her husband for death because he now will be chosen. You know, and she would know that she's basically setting her husband up to now be a part of the Suicide Squad, essentially.
Suicide Squad. Wow, I feel like I'm being convinced.
The beauty of literature is you can interpret it however you like. Yeah, everyone's right.
Everyone's right.
And also, as Matt Squire, he's definitely right.
Man, okay.
I would agree with what you're saying, Stalen. She is essentially sending Dynakes to his death by being able to fight at Thermopylae. But I think at the same time, she probably understands that this is basically what all Spartan men have been training for their entire life.
What Dynakes would want.
Yeah, right. He would want to be able to fight for his country at this battle, to die for his country.
Okay. I think you both, yeah. Okay. I think I've been convinced I was wrong because I'm also finding it on Reddit. So, you know, that's a very good source of truth. But no, just the fact that like what we were talking about, like Arete is motivated and Dynakes is motivated to keep that baby alive because that's their only male bloodline in Arete's family. Anyway, I was clearly wrong, but hey, this is why we do this book club, to help us understand what we're reading more. But I was like, man, did Arete do this because she wanted to preserve the family bloodline? Was she mad at Dynakes for committing adultery, so she wanted to expose him? So then he'd go, but it's interesting. So talk about like competing factors of honor, right? Like there's the honor of going to battle. There's the honor of fighting as a Spartan and defending your country and your family. And then there's the honor of being faithful to your wife. There's the honor of telling the truth. There's a lot of competing issues here on what the right decision is to do. That's fascinating.
ChatGPT seems to think that Matt might be wrong.
ChatGPT's been very wrong, though. Like, there's a lot of things that like I've like searched with this book, and it's been very wrong. It really confused me with the Rooster's relationship because I was like, wait, he's the son of who?
Yeah. Part of how I interpreted the story was, oddly enough, on Sunday, we're going through the book of Genesis in the Bible at church, and we're reading the story where God has promised, hey, Abram and Sarah, even though you all don't have any kids and you're in your 80s, I'm going to give you children and descendants that are more numerous than the stars in the sky. Well, it's been several more years since that promise, and basically they try to take God's promise into their own hands. And, nowadays we have different methods and medical interventions to help with infertility, which I know even for some of us in our group, that topic hits home, right? And Sarai, back in the day, it was like dishonorable to not even have an heir, period, not just a son, but specifically a son. So being barren was like just not a good thing back then. And it was very common culturally to just like, here, take my female servant, sleep with her, have a kid with her so that you can have an heir. So committed acts of infidelity was prioritized over being childless in that day and age. And so with Arete, she wasn't barren, but she had not only, obviously it's great that they had 4 kids, but in the Spartan culture, not having a son, there was no male heir to continue the name. So that's why I was trying to figure out, like, okay, is she trying to preserve this kid's life just because they need some male heir, or is this truly Dynake's son? And so she's not upset with Dynake's because, like, now they have a son, and she approved this. She's like, yeah, go sleep with Harmonia. But yeah, that totally makes sense, because I was like, why would he sleep with someone who's not even a Spartan? Like, if he's gonna commit adultery. So that was some of where my thinking was, where I was like, well, maybe Arete's okay with this because culturally the priority above fidelity is having a male heir, and certain cultures back then.
I do think, though, that there probably is still some truth in that this elevates Dynake's to a level. It's okay, he's got an heir now. And I don't think it doesn't seem like it's being viewed as this shameful thing that he's done, is what how I read that. Whether, again, he actually whether it really is his child or not.
Madon, the leader of the council, does say on page 183, consider what you're saying. You defame your wife by attesting to this, quote, truth, and yourself by swearing to this falsehood. So they're even saying, we know this isn't true, and you're saying it is anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting. But they're saying, like, you defame your wife, right? Defame. That doesn't seem like the right word, defame, if you've committed adultery. Am I interpreting this correctly? Matt, the resident expert?
That sounds right. If he's admitting to committing adultery, then yeah, he is ruining his wife and her reputation and her honor and his honor.
So I think there is some smattering of his view with the group, even if he does have a son now in his name, whether or not it's actually a son or not. But so I don't think he came off scot-free, Stalen. But are you saying he did? Is that how you interpreted it?
I think that there, again, culturally speaking, it seems like the value of having a son is still placed on a pretty high pedestal.
Because I feel like Arete's brother was not thought of fondly for procreating rooster, right? Like, that wasn't oh, sweet, like you had a bastard son or whatever. Like, that wasn't viewed positively, right?
Yeah, I don't think so, but I couldn't say for sure.
Well, maybe that can be our closing question. Do you think it's admirable what Dynake's and Arete did to lie for the sake of keeping this child alive? Because in that culture, it's not like there's the statute of limitations, right? Like we have in America. Like, he's going to have to admit to this boy being his son for the rest of his life. Like, the truth can never be found out, or else they'll be like, oh, this was a lie. Okay, let's kill this child. Right? I mean, that's my understanding of the law there. So to me, I'm like, people are going to view you as your character is stained in this way. So what do you all think about that? Was that the right thing to do?
It's a tough question. Is it the honorable thing? Also a tough question. You're put in a situation where you're either making your wife look like a complete fool, or you make yourself look like a complete fool. What would you guys do in this situation?
Yeah, I think of, like, if your spouse comes, or even more modernized, your spouse comes home one day and it's like, hey, this is our kid now. I saved them from this horrible thing, but you do have to tell everyone that you had this child with someone else. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know the scenario in which that would play out, but there probably is one.
It's so hard to think of a modern day scenario.
Jerry Seinfeld stuff, for sure.
I'm sure that there is some component that, we've already seen with a lot. Arete, she kind of, similar to Dainikis, she kind of exemplifies like a strong woman. And I think in some ways, if that's your spouse, there's got to be some pride that he would have to say, like, the compassion that she has for this baby, or the care that she has for this baby, that she would put our reputation in front of this. She would prioritize a child's life over our reputation.
Yeah, I think I agree. It would be very hard. I think one thing that would make it easier is that the person that you're lying alongside with is your wife. So it's like, if you're going to keep a secret that it's that big, it's good to have that secret with your wife. You know what I mean? To have each other, because that's the best relationship to have a secret with. You know what I mean? In a very positive way. I think it's a good example of breaking a law, like breaking a moral code that breaks a law for something that you have a personal belief is the ultimate right thing to do. Right. I mean, it even talks about that in the Bible. It's like, respect the governments, respect the law, except if it comes directly in conflict with the Bible, like murder someone. It's like, not going to do that. I'm using a very extreme example, but I guess it's kind of relevant to this story, though. Another topic that I'm thinking of on, off the cuff too, is like, we live so individualistically. It's hard to understand, like, how could you kill this baby son? But, we do read that in the Bible, where it's like the guard that let Peter, or that the Peter escaped when the earthquake happened, and he was about to kill himself and Peter's like, don't do it. And they go home, and he and his whole family were baptized. It's like, wait, they all got saved? Or Daniel in the lion's den, the guys like lie about Daniel, and then the king throws him, the liars and their families, into the lion's den to be killed. It's like, they didn't do anything. They were innocent. And we view it very individualistically. I'm not saying it's right, but I also am acknowledging that family collectivist cultures, where it's like, you are an extension of your family unit. You are an extension of the community. You are Spartan, right? Like that character who died while being whipped. It's like, your body is not your own. You are Spartan. Like, you are for the Spartan cause. I don't know. I just love this story, and just thinking of all the different twists and turns.
I thought the way they portray the role of women in Spartan society was really neat. As they were talking about the Crypteia, Xiones talks to Arete.
That's in book 3, actually, at Arete's house.
Yes. So Arete asks Xiones who runs the country, essentially. And he responds, the king and the E4s. And she's like, oh, is that what you think? Like, it's actually the women who tell the men what to do. And they're like in charge of the Crypteia, the secret society that makes bad people disappear and are never found again. And then this example of Arete showing up at this trial and winning her argument was pretty amazing. They run a lot of the ins and outs, the day-to-day life of Sparta. And there's a brief part of it where they are also extremely disciplined in keeping their bodies physically fit, because they know they have to produce strong, physically fit children. So they're extremely good runners too. They are confident, they're witty, they're smart, they're funny, and they're basically in control of everything.
That's good.
And, I mean, you can kind of see that, how they talk to the men and they get their way, essentially.
Yeah. Was she the one whose husband died and like went to the wrestling pit where all the guys are like naked wrestling each other, and she's like, "Who's gonna marry me?"
Yeah.
Is that her?
Yeah.
It's her.
Yeah.
Yeah. She like, I'm telling you, she's awesome. You guys have any other thoughts on the book?
Have you guys talked about the movie much? I'm just thinking because so many more people are going to be familiar with the movie than the book, and I'm trying to put characters from this book into characters that I think they may be represented by in the movie. Obviously, some of them are the same.
Is Rooster going to be the hunchback dude in the movie?
I mean, maybe, yeah.
That's kind of what I thought whenever they introduced him. Yeah, I honestly thought Zionis was going to be, because they were talking about how he was like deformed.
Well, and then you were just talking about the women, and the main Leonidas's wife was a really strong woman character in the movie. So it's just kind of interesting to try to like. I need to watch the movie again because it's been a while.
She goes to a trial, or she goes to the.
The
council of elders.
Yeah, she got into political fight, But that was a super cool movie, and that's we should make some links back to it because a lot of people will probably be able to better understand if they haven't read the book, especially what we're saying.
I was thinking we should watch it at the Airbnb on our retreat.
Yeah, let's do it.
Heck yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Books Brothers podcast. Next week, we'll discuss Book 5 of Gates of Fire, Polynikes. If you have enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect with. Lastly, we would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram at Books Brothers Podcast. Until next time, read, reflect, and connect.